What's up, everyone? Welcome to Hollywood Unveiled, where we pull back the curtain on the Hollywood entertainment industry and get to know the people and stories behind the magic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Logan.
And Logan, we have a movie today that gave me a new appreciation for what I have. A movie that I'd give an arm and a leg for, probably more so the leg. A movie I saw, and it never gets old, and neither do the puns. Logan, today's movie is Saw.
Yes, Saw from 2004. Now, I'll be honest, this is the first horror movie I saw in theaters. Like prior to this, like even reading a story of Nightmare on Elm Street gave me nightmares. So like I was not a horror kid, and yet Saw was the first thing I jumped into with both feet and loved. Like that opened the door for all of horror for me, which I think is fascinating.
Same here. You know, I was never really a horror guy. I got kind of warmed up to the idea of a scary movie with The Mummy, you know,
Fair.
which
has
you know,
horror elements, so I can see
elements, you know, but this one really kind of opened my eyes to like horror doesn't always just mean slashy, bloody everything. It can actually be very intellectual. What
made this one really work, like when I was a kid, the reason I wasn't scared going into it because it wasn't like a horror movie. It was literally, I was like, oh, it's a psychological thriller.
Right. It kind of came from more of the world of like say Seven, you know,
exactly.
Things like that. And it was a really intriguing detective story. It's revealing little bits here and there throughout, and you just were dying to know more of what's going to happen. So this one, to me, like it introduced me to horror because it was just a brilliant concept top to bottom. But Logan, I'm sure you've got a lot to share with us, so let's play a game.
Yes, I mean, like I said, this one is a favorite. So yeah, we'll jump into it. So Saw came out in 2004, directed by James Wan and written by Leigh Whannell. It stars Carrie Elways as Dr. Lawrence Gordon, Leigh Whannell as Adam, Danny Glover as Detective Tapp, Ken Lung as Detective Singh, Michael Emerson as Zepp, and Tobin Bell as John Kramer. Before we jump into this one, I think it's interesting to look at where the horror scene is in 2004. Up until this point, it's been a lot of supernatural stuff. It's been things like The Sixth Sense, or you get stuff like Darkness Falls. You know, it's a lot of like, it's ghost stories. It's 13 Ghosts. It's, you know, it is the supernatural.
There was a lot of that going on, right? Just like
100%.
Everybody wanted their ghost stories.
Yes.
Ghost ship, even.
Ghost ship, exactly. That was like 2002. Exactly. Yes. You know, as these movies are kind of percolating the scene, James Wan and Leigh Whannell are going to film school together in Australia. They graduate and they decide we want to make a movie together. And they're kind of inspired by low budget independent projects like the Blair Witch Project and Aronofsky's Pi, which like Aronofsky financed himself. So they're like, ooh, okay. So like we can kind of make this work. So they start kind of coming up with ideas. And the first thing they come up with is, all right, well, we know our budget, so let's legitimately think of what we can actually afford to shoot. So like, what's the cheapest idea we can think of? All right, 2 guys in a room. All right, here's your starting point. Originally, they had an idea where it was, all right, it's 2 guys stuck in an elevator, and the whole thing is seen from the perspective of the security cameras in the elevator. It's like, all right, that's an interesting kind of setup. I can see that being a movie. While they're kind of going through this pitch phase, James Wan comes up with an idea of the 2 men on the opposite side of a room and the dead body in the middle. And kind of like, well, how'd this dead body get there? But like he kind of comes up with some basic beats for it, and he comes up with the twist ending, which we'll get into in just a little in a little bit when it comes.
No spoilers.
Well, I think with this one, we kind of have, like, you know, if we were talking about The Sixth Sense, we kind of have to talk about the ending. It is easily one of the best endings, not only in horror movie history, but in movie history. So he kind of throws those ideas out to Leigh. And originally, Leigh is like, I didn't get it. But he kind of hangs up the phone. He starts kind of going over it again in his head. And then he tells the story where he sits down at his diary and he just writes one word on the page, Saw. And from there, the main idea of the thing just kind of like fully kind of coalesced together. Now, the idea of Jigsaw didn't come along for a while. He kind of came about because Leigh was getting migraines. So he was getting these terrible headaches while on a job, and being a bit of a hypochondriac, he was like, oh, it's a brain tumor. So, he went to the doctor, got like an MRI, got a few tests taken. But while he was sitting in the waiting room, he kind of was thinking through this thing of like, well, what would that do to a person if they're given just this world shattering news? And that kind of developed into the idea of Jigsaw, where it's like, okay, well, he's told this and it kickstarts him into becoming a serial killer, basically, and how that kind of develops. And it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Now, this movie kind of, at least in my opinion, gets unjustly qualified as part of the torture porn series of movies.
Right. At the very least, this first one doesn't belong in that category.
See, I don't think any of them really fall into that category. I think there's violence and gore in them, but I think there's a certain amount of the characters relishing in the violence that makes it torture porn.
Fair.
Hostel, I would totally agree.
Hostel, absolutely, yes.
Hell, I haven't seen a lot of them, but I'd be more inclined to say the French film Martyrs is much closer in line with a torture porn kind of thing as opposed to this, because the characters in the movie aren't relishing in the joy of the torture.
Right.
So at least that's me. But Wan also didn't really think of this like that kind of movie. He approached it like a mystery thriller with only one short segment of torture, and that's the head trap sequence. So they're like, all right, if we want to do this, we got to make a short film to kind of help sell the idea. And they wanted to make sure they were selling it as a director-actor team. So it's like, all right, so James is going to direct, Lee's going to be the actor in the short. That way, when we pitch to the studio, it's, well, you've seen Leigh act, you've seen me direct. You got to let both of us do those jobs on the big thing. But they had nowhere near enough money. Like they were putting together the budget that they were kind of needing, and they only had $30,000, which they were finding was nowhere near enough for even the smallest scale of what they were wanting to do. So they took $5,000 of that and made the short film. The short film is just the head trap sequence, except it's Leigh as David, who's kind of the survivor of the head trap. So it's not Amanda in that setup, but it's David. And it's just him being interrogated by the police, recalling the events that kind of led him to that and kind of getting himself out. But that was, just how James and Leigh could kind of take it around and make sure they were making it known. They were like, we're selling this package deal, not just the idea of the script. Like, you got to take the script, James and Leigh, all a package deal. So in 2003, they end up coming out to LA, and then they meet with producer Greg Hoffman. So Hoffman watches the short, loves it, takes it to his partners, Mark Berg and Orrin Cools, and the trio will eventually form Twisted Pictures. They were kind of the big production company behind all of the Saw movies. Now, they loved the short, and they made Leigh and James a relatively low offer in the grand scheme of things. I mean, they offered them full creative control and 25% of the net profits, but not a lot on the front end. Now, they'd got better offers from like DreamWorks, shockingly enough, but DreamWorks wasn't going to let James direct and wasn't going to let Leigh be the lead.
And the killer would turn out to be Shrek.
Something like, yeah. So they're like, all right, we're going to go with Twisted. Now, getting that trio on board bumps their budget up to a little over $1 million. Now they start going with casting. They go to Cary Elwes. He sees the short film, loves it. He also read the script in one sitting, which for him, he says, is very rare. When he met with James and Leigh, James apparently brought Billy the Puppet, because he had made that himself for the short, a whole dossier of sketches of like the different traps and all the different things, and a small scale model of the bathroom to show him. So he showed up with the full serial killer kit of like, here's all of the, to really give him a sense of this thing. Now, Shawnee Smith was kind of an interesting get. She is not a big horror fan, but once again, she saw the short. She was like, I love this. I think this is great. There's a story, and I don't know how true this is, but James Wan had a crush on her when he was a teenager. So he like haphazardly mentioned to the casting director, like, oh man, well, I had a crush on Shawnee Smith. It'd be really cool to get her for this. And then was shocked when the casting director was like, hey, so we got Amanda. Yeah, it's going to be Shawnee. She's coming in. She's doing that. And he's like, she's doing what now? Huh? What? Now, the other kind of big name that came on board with this, like, yeah, you have Danny Glover, you have Michael Emerson, but both of them only shot for like 2-3 days tops. The other name who, would become a big thing with the franchise is Tobin Bell. Now, he came on board because he thought the location was fresh. I don't know how fresh this bathroom looks, but he thought it was interesting that the whole movie was kind of set there, and he loved the ending. He's this quote where he said, "I believe if the filmmakers got that ending scene right, the whole movie would be worth it." Also, he just really wanted to work with Danny Glover.
And how much time did he actually spend with Danny Glover on that one?
Hilariously, I don't think those characters ever interact.
That's what I thought.
Camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they ever interact on camera. I really don't. Now, here's something that I think is interesting. So they originally offered the part of Jigsaw to a guy named Mike Butters. But Butters apparently turned it down because he's like, Jigsaw doesn't have any exciting scenes.
Okay.
Now, Butters is still in the movie. They gave him another part. He's Paul. He's the victim in the razor wire maze.
Oh, okay.
Definitely like a different kind of guy for someone like Jigsaw. Like, I'm really glad they went with Tobin because like he brings a massive gravitas to it. Also another person who like has been very vocal about like, yeah, I don't really like horror films. Like, they gross me out. They scare me. Like, I don't really like them because but I think that's why he's so good in this is he brings such a character to it.
But I also like being a paid actor.
Well, that too. I mean, Brad Dourif is also one of those. Like he played Chucky, and he's like, I don't watch horror. Like horror movies give me nightmares.
Yeah,
but he in
particular has given me nightmares.
Well, not only Chucky, but like he's been on record as saying like, yeah, I'm retired unless it's a Chucky thing. So he just loves that character. And
I loved him in Deadwood.
But yeah, and I think Tobin is right about the ending of this movie because they really do. They nail it. So for those who don't know, sorry, spoiler alert, we're going into this movie, but it is literally 20 years old. So,
oh God.
Yeah, it came out in 2004. It's 20 years old. So at the ending of this movie, Dr. Gordon has cut his own foot off. He escapes. Adam is rummaging through the pockets of the man who he thinks to be Jigsaw, only to find a tape in his pocket, revealing that guy is just another victim. The dead body in the middle of the floor then stands up, peels a whole prosthetic off of his head, revealing himself to be Jigsaw and leaving Adam locked in this room screaming in terror.
A scene that you so dramatically recreated at your Halloween party last year.
Well, it was dressed as your favorite horror movie villain, and I did prosthetics, so why not fully deck myself out? But I can't disagree with what Tobin said at all. Like, this is not only one of the best horror movie endings, but it is one of the best twist endings in movie history. And honestly, genuinely, just like if you're listing like top 10 best holy hell endings to like I would put it on that list. I don't know what else is on that list, but this is in the top 10.
It as an ending, I just remember that music cue.
Yes.
Just way it built up as he was standing and that became a staple in all the Saw movies after that when you get the reveal. I know that really informed a lot of other filmmakers out there and how they approached the reveal in their movies too.
Did.
So.
And I think it's one of those where some filmmakers took the wrong lesson from it.
Sure.
But when you have a movie that is so focused on character building, showing that we as the audience are just as biased as one of the characters because we didn't like, if you go back and rewatch Saw, a detail that I find fascinating, the only real scene where we get to see John before that reveal, it's when we see Dr. Gordon kind of talking about him and he's like, this patient has an inoperable frontal lobe tumor and this. And there's one shot of John in his hospital bed laying there. And he has a notebook on his desk that has a sketch on it. And if you are genuinely paying attention, it's the fucking head trap. It is the reverse bear trap. It is not obfuscated. It is not obscured by anything else. It is literally just the reverse bear trap in this sketchbook. But we as the audience are doing exactly what Dr. Gordon is doing. Because of the filmmaking, we are barely treating his character like more than set dressing. Yeah. We don't notice that we don't even think that it could be that guy, And then we get that big reveal and it's like, oh shit, How did we not see that? Like it's such a good ending, and it adds so much when it's what a good twist should do. It makes it better the second time around. Now filming for this took 18 days and was all done exclusively in a warehouse in Los Angeles. Every single set was all built within the same warehouse. Like, oh, hey, we're at Dr. Gordon's apartment. Okay, cool. That's upstairs and like the top floor of this warehouse. Oh, we have these hallways to like, the crappy motels they're going to. Okay, cool. That's this hallway here. All of it is in that warehouse. Now they finished the bathroom scenes in 6 days. And they shot it all chronologically just because with the deterioration of the costumes and all of that, they're like, it'd be way easier to shoot this chronologically. Now, the short schedule means they had to shoot the film in a lot more of a gritty style, which is kind of interesting because Wan wanted to shoot it like Hitchcock. He wanted everything to be super planned out and very methodical and all of that. And as soon as he saw, it's like, we have 18 days. He's like, can't do any of that. All right, let's tone it down. Let's do that. Let's get this going. Now, while working on the edit, they realized they did not have a lot. Like they were missing a solid, like, not necessarily 10 minutes of content, but like they needed like 10 minutes of screen time just to get it up to a feature length kind of thing. And they had already done $400 worth of reshoots.
$400.
All they could afford. But editor Kevin Groothart, who would go on to direct Saw 6, Saw the Final Chapter, and Saw X, helped Wan fill in the gaps.
I guess that wasn't the final chapter then.
No. Well, I mean, to be fair, Friday the 13th, the final chapter is number 4 out of like 11.
Oh, yeah.
So, but there's a stylistic thing where it's like, because Adam is a photographer, you see like flashes of the photos he's taken and a lot of those stills, and we get that. So they started adding that into the movie, or using surveillance footage, that they had for random like BTS footage. It's like, oh, okay, we can use that, and that can be part of this, and we, so they were using all these different things to kind of build it out and get it to where it needed to be. Now, Lionsgate was originally going to put this direct to video, but when they screened it at Sundance, it sold out essentially for 3 straight nights. And they were like, this needs a theatrical release. Now, this thing ended up making, on a $1 million budget, $103.9 million. And the entire franchise to date has made, at least domestically, $529 million, which is wild considering it only cost $1 million to initially make. At one point, there was a catchphrase for the series that was, if it's Halloween, it must be Saw. So like the budgets for the movies were super cheap, and they just kept pumping them out year after year after year.
Yeah.
So really have time to go through a lengthy pre or post process. Now, what I think is also really cool about this franchise, and this is the only horror movie franchise that I've seen do something like this. The Saw series actually started a blood drive to coincide with the release of every single movie. Now, I don't have up-to-date numbers on this. The last article I could find about it was when Saw 4 came out in 2007. But they started this thing called the Give Till It Hurts drive. And as of 2007, they have collected nearly 38,000 pints of blood and have saved over 112,500 lives.
That's amazing. That's wonderful.
Essentially, they doubled the amount collected every year that they were releasing a movie. So 2004, they released whatever. When Saw 2, they doubled that amount, and they doubled it after that and doubled it after that. So I would assume they've been keeping that going with every movie since.
That's amazing.
And I think that's a great way to use the platform of, it's a horror movie, but also want to give back. What can we do? Well, there isn't a lot of horror movies. Blood. Let's do that. Let's make that work.
I mean, they lost so much, and
someone's got to give back.
So they got to get back,
Hello, Jake. I want to play a game. To survive, you just got to like, comment, subscribe, do all the usual YouTube-y type stuff.
I can do that.
Seriously, tell us how we're doing here. If there's a movie you want to see us talk about, you think change cinema, sound off in the comments below. Leave us a review. It helps a lot. It lets people know, hey, you're listening to the fact that we're just kind of talking about movies. But yes, do that, or I'll chop your fingers off, I guess.
Well, damn, that got dark.
Oh, damn.
Let's just go back to the show now.
Well, Jake, on the note of this movie,
Mm-hmm.
I want to play a game.
No, no. Are
It's
there any
game
traps
time.
involved? Well, the whole thing's a trap.
Well, let's see how your score is, and then we'll see
Oh,
how well
well.
you do.
All
But that's
right.
right. It is game time. I got some questions for you here.
All right.
Now, I am very curious to see how you will do with this. I know you said you haven't really done a lot of research in it,
Not
but
lately, no.
let's see how you do. So, like I said, you got 6 questions. Let's get ourselves started.
All right.
Question number 1. This movie has spawned a massive franchise
Mm-hmm.
from movies to video games.
Oh,
How
crap.
many installments are in the total franchise that have been released so far?
Now you say video games. Now you really threw a wrench into my trap. Okay, so there have been 10 films and 11th coming out
That's why I also
on the
said
way.
have been released.
Yeah, have been released. So 10. I'm just going to say one video game. I feel like I'm wrong. So that's going to be 10 movies, one game. That's 11.
So close, Jake. It was actually 2 video games.
All right.
Saw and then Saw 2 Flesh and Blood, I believe is
Hmm.
the name of it. Now I will give you a bonus point here, a chance to kind of redeem.
Okay.
Who is the lead character of the first video game? It is someone
Character
from
or
Saw
actor?
1. It is a character from Saw 1.
I want to go with Shawnee's character.
Oh, Amanda.
Yeah.
Not a bad guess.
Okay.
No, it is
But
actually
wrong.
Danny Glover. It is Detective
Oh,
Cap.
interesting.
The game reveals that he did not die from the gunshot wound he sustained at the end of the film. All right. Question number 2.
All right.
Depending on the framing of your television,
Mhm.
you can actually see Leigh Whannell in the movie appearing as 3 different characters. Who are those characters? Obviously, you know Adam is one of them.
As a filmmaker, I know that he'd probably, with the low budget they have, he's probably standing in for like somebody else at some point or another. Danny Glover's partner, did he stand in for him at some point?
I need 2 characters. If
That's one. That's one of them.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say he. You know what? Sure, he stood in for Jigsaw, even laying on the ground or something.
No, unfortunately not. But you did get one of those correct.
All right, I got a half point.
So because you are correct, because of the reshoots, they couldn't get any of their actors back for a lot of the reshoots. So Leigh stood in for a chunk of them. But in one of the shots, depending on the framing of the shot, if it is widescreen or if it's full screen, when you see Detective Tapp and Detective Singh breaking into Jigsaw's lair, you see Singh come through the door with a shotgun. It's just straight up Leigh.
Just like straight on.
Like when it's the very tight framing, it's kind of cut off here. When it's wide, it's here. You can totally tell it's Leigh walking in with the shotgun. But the other one is Amanda. There's a close-up shot they also got in the reshoots when Amanda is digging through the intestines of the guy in the cell, and those hands that are digging
the hands. That makes sense. Yeah.
Belong to Leigh. But you got 2 points out of that question, so that is not bad at all.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Question number 3. Saw holds a record in the Guinness Book of World Records. What record does the series hold?
Is it biggest profit versus budget?
I need better terminology for that.
Oh, so I'm close.
Potential title.
Worldwide box office.
You know what? I'll give it to you.
Okay.
Because it holds the Guinness Book of World Records for most successful horror movie series.
Okay.
So that's what I was saying. So I'll give it to you because you were basically hitting.
It's the profit versus the budget, basically. That's what I'm,
exactly. So that's where it's like
if we're talking the whole franchise too, that maybe, but like, yeah. I mean, even just from what you're saying, from like over $100 million off of about $1 million for the movie, right? So
yeah. Next question. This film kickstarted the careers of both James Wan and Leigh Whannell. And between the 2 of them, they have created 3 horror franchises. What are those franchises?
You son of a bitch. Franchises. Does Saw count as one of them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Because I hope
they started that. That totally counts.
My wife is going to kill me because she's a big Leigh Whannell fan.
Damn right she is.
Yeah. Dead Silence only had one movie. That doesn't count as a franchise.
Oh
What
man, I
else
want
is
to give
there?
you a point just for
Oh, wait,
knowing
wait.
that Silence existed.
Oh, I love Dead Silence. It's one of my
It's
favorites.
so good.
And
I love it. All right, Jake, I'm going to need an
yeah, I
answer.
lost it. Buzzer. Sorry.
All right. So Saw, they then would work together next on Insidious. Yes, which James directed the first two. Lee made his directorial debut doing the third.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
James went on to do The Conjuring.
Conjuring. Yeah. Yeah.
That
As soon
whole
as you said
universe
Insidious, I was like,
started.
and Conjuring. I love
Yes.
those movies. Yeah.
Not enough, it would
Dude,
seem.
I've got a few friends right now who are really going to let me have it after if they
Yeah.
see this.
Me too.
So, yeah.
All right. Next question. True or false? Tobin Bell plays the corpse on the floor of the bathroom the entire time.
False.
It's actually true. Tobin showed up on set every single day where they needed to see that body in the middle of the floor.
Right. Yeah.
And every time they've done like flashbacks to that bathroom, he is like, Tobin is gung ho when it comes to this franchise about like, he is what many people consider within like the confines of the movies, the keeper of the lore. If there is something where they write for the character and he's like, well, that doesn't make sense. He's the one who's like, John wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Or well, that doesn't fit with the character. We should do this different. Like, so he takes very very good care of the franchise as a whole.
That's cool. I mean, that said, I wonder if he ever just napped while they were shooting around him.
I mean, I think I saw what the trickiest part is. Like, one of his feet is like the toes are arched in a way where his heel is up in the air. So it's just like you're gonna get a Charlie horse so quick, but resting like that every single day. That means he is on the floor for 6 days minimum, just being a corpse. All right, well, Jake, you are on to your last question, and I'll be honest, your stats for this particular game time, not so good. You need this one to move out of the 50% failure rating. I think.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it.
This series broke another record that was held by composer John Williams. What was this record?
The number of films a composer has consecutively done in a franchise? Does that make sense?
Judges? That is correct.
All right.
Yes, composer Charlie Clouser broke a record that was held by John Williams for scoring the most scores within a single franchise.
Okay. Not as articulately put as what you just said, but that is what I meant.
John Williams held the record with 9 movies. But Clouser has done the score for all 10 movies of the Saw series and is coming back for Saw 11, as far as I know. So he now holds that record. He has done done 11 scores in the same franchise.
9 movies. I wonder what it could have been.
Yeah. You know, must have been that Willow septilogy.
Yeah. Nobody really watched it though. So.
No.
Yeah.
Jake, you know what? I don't think you did terribly in this one. You got a 6 out of 10 for the possible points. I'm going to say that is still a passing grade.
Just like my high school record.
Hey, you know what? D's get degrees, right? That's what they say. There might be.
Never heard that one. That's a good one. I like that.
I don't really know. Overall, this movie changed horror. After this movie came out, the horror scene we talked about beforehand, it was a lot of like ghost stories and demons and ghouls. And this transitioned into a period for a very long time of the real horror is man.
Grounding things
monsters.
Like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was back to human monsters and serial killers and crazy people. And it kind of went back to that for a very long time until James Wan and Leigh did Insidious and went, hey, but ghost stories though. Like, so I think it's fascinating that they have been kind of bouncing the zeitgeist of horror back and forth.
Oh yeah.
Over the last several decades with kind of coming onto the scene. But yeah, no, this I think not only sparked a bunch of a massive interest in horror for me, but I think, you know, when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of like horror franchises, or a lot of them like they'd already started so long ago. It was Friday the 13th, it was Nightmare, it was Halloween. You know, Scream had already been a thing, but it was only seemingly a trilogy. Texas Chainsaw had like come and gone and, you know, hadn't really done anything for years. So like this was the first horror franchise that kind of is in the same level of those guys. Just start within my lifetime. And it's wild to see just how far it has come from its initial kind of release.
And as a film, from a filmmaker's perspective on it too, what was really interesting was that this movie came out at a really interesting time where prior to this, if you made a movie for very little money, Robert Rodriguez, El Mariachi, right?
Yes, Mariachi trilogy.
When he made that, like the original, the studios were like, this is amazing, this is fantastic. Here's even more money. Let's see what you can do. Yeah. Right. But right about this time is when James Wan, he came into the scene. He said, oh, that's what this is going to be like. But right about this time is when the studios start saying, wow, you made this movie for so little money. That's amazing. Let's see what you can do with less.
Yeah.
And that seemed to have continued for a little while for Wan's career. And
yeah. I mean, it seems like he was getting to take more creative, risks.
Oh,
as opposed, But yeah, like looking through the rest of his filmography, like Dead Silence didn't really land too well with audiences.
I love
Neither
that
did
movie.
Death Sentence. Both of those I think are still fantastic movies. Hell, Death Sentence is a better remake of Death Wish than the official remake of Death Wish.
Yeah, and both, like all of them too. Really they didn't land necessarily in the box office, but they landed as stories. They were solid films. I love them.
Yeah, so no, it's wild that he makes Death Sentence in 2007 and then doesn't make another thing for 3 years, but then comes back with Insidious 1 and 2, hits with The Conjuring, does Conjuring 2, and then all of a sudden it's Furious 7, Aquaman, and then Malignant, like stuff where I'm just like, Wan's having fun now. And Leigh, honestly, like I love his stuff. Like Upgrade is a brilliant movie. His rendition of The Invisible Man is fantastic, and I cannot wait for his adaptation of The Wolf Man. I think that one's going to be really, really cool.
Well, Logan, it's that time. Where can the people find you?
I'm findable. You can find me on Twitter at FilmGuy89, Instagram and Letterboxd at FilmGuy1989. Years ago, I actually did a table read for the first 3 Saw movies in Halloween. That was a fun couple of bits right at the beginning of the shutdown. And I'm guessing by the time this airs, you can also find me on the Scare Me Twice podcast, where we take a deep dive through various horror franchises. How about you, Jake? Where can people find you?
You can find me at VFX2Go on all the socials. You can find me on our website, vfx2go.com, where you can find news, tutorials, interviews, tips on the visual effects industry on our brand new blog.
And Jake, did you know we also have a website?
I sure do. That would be HollywoodUnveiled.com, and you can follow us on the socials at Hollywood Unveiled Podcast. One of these days we'll post something to it. And Logan, one of these days we'll also figure out how to end this show. But until then, I've been Jake.
And I've been Logan.
And Logan, let's go play a game.
Oh, I like my feet.